first things first, let's talk about start to finish. So when you buy a big bore kit for your bike, you have two options, right? You either buy all the parts and install it yourself, or you go to some, engine company or just bike builder and have them build you a motor, So that's a beautiful car. So I elected, of course, to build the engine myself. So I went to Hammer Performance. I emailed them and said, hey guys, I'm looking for, roughly 100 wheel horsepower, whatever, right? So I can do stuff like that. Short shift to 100, no problem. Anyway, so, that's only a 45. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm blowing through the speed limit anyway. You didn't see that, folks. Anyway, so I wanted about 100 wheel horse. That was kind of my goal. So I emailed them and I just said, what do you guys provide that would get me there? I did a bunch of research on their site. Honestly, I didn't really look at any other sites because I was in contact with a local, pretty reputable engine or bike builder, bike shop, really engine shop. And I called them, and they're like a family-owned business and everything. And they're good people. I have a buddy who got a bike built by them. Actually, that 130 wheel horse road glide on my channel I've had a couple times. His bike was built by them. So I'm not poo-pooing them. However, they didn't seem super jazzed about doing a Sportster. They really kind of focus on big twins. So I was like, well, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But I'm going to find another solution, right? And I think they would have done it, but I just didn't get a lot of confidence that they not that they didn't know what they were doing, because they could have figured it out, it's no big deal, but just that they really wanted to do it, that they were excited about it. Okay, fine, whatever. So then I really started looking into Hammer, and I'm like, all right, how hard is this to do myself? Is this a job I want to take on myself? I'd never torn into the inside of a motor. I was a little nervous, I was a little hesitant. So I looked it up, and their website, Hammer's site, man, I'll tell you, top notch. It's old school, but it's got all the info, so who cares? It's not flashy, but I don't need flashy, I need info, right? Great technical details, exactly what you need to do, how to do it, what you need to buy. And you just email them, and then they give you the rest of the info. So read their site, emailed them, asked some stupid questions. They answered it for me. All the dumb questions, no problem. Aaron's a wizard over there, just answering all your tech questions. So I emailed them like midsummer last year, putting out feelers. And then I finally decided to go with a kit in like October. And so they had, they sent me a quote, everything else. Started buying parts, exhaust, and everything. So in December, something like that, I actually bought the kit from them. But the entire time, they were super good to work with, responsive. I called up Aaron a couple times and just had good conversations, whatever. So fast forward to the actual install, right? Well, they first of all send you an entire kit of everything you need, which is super convenient for somebody who's never done this before. There was no real major fear of like, oh, did I forget to order something, and all that kind of thing. So you get the kit, comes in a big old box. You guys saw videos on it, me doing the install. Just kind of get to the point where you lay out their instructions. I printed them off, printed out the stock service manual. I just kind of put them side by side and started tinkering away, getting my torque wrenches out and all the hand tools and blah, blah, blah. And it all kind of worked out. It's really not that hard. It's really not too bad. If you have a good mechanical aptitude, I would totally recommend taking it on. It was not a nightmare project. It was not something that really, I said to myself, oh wow, I never want to do that again. A couple little things here and there. I had to grind the pushrod base plate because it didn't fit with the cylinder. I had to grind my exhaust flanges a little bit because when they mill the heads, they run into the fins. Little stuff like that. Just a couple little hiccups, things I had to learn and take care of. But other than that, totally good to go. No big deal. So we did all that. And wound up with a pretty powerful little Sporty. But the only weird thing about the install was their instructions were oddly specific, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but The braking procedure, I talked about it before. It's 10 seconds, shut the bike off till it's fully cooled. Then it's 20 seconds, 30, 40. Then you ride it for like exactly 1 mile and then exactly 2 miles, letting it fully cool off in between all those sessions. So you can do that over a couple days, do that all the same day, whatever. The best way to feel if it cooled off, just touch the head and the header pipe. You'll know. That's kind of where all the heat is. And I kind of waited till they were back to room temperature and then waited a little longer just to be safe. Anywho, do all that. Then you do a normal 500 mile break-in. Nothing too out of the ordinary there. However, once you do all that, there's a shocking amount of metal in the pan, which is typical with anything you're breaking anything in. But just, it's always a little nervous, even though you know it's supposed to be there. It's just a little nervous. And then you're good to go. So far, as far as I can tell, I'm not like burning any oil. It runs great, so I'm super happy. They send you the carb jets, so you don't have to worry too much about tuning, or you just buy like a Dyno Vision or whatever if you're running a fuel injected bike. So the tuning's relatively easy. They claim that most people don't even get them dyno tuned. They just kind of rock and roll and have good results and good power. There might be a little bit more to get out of this thing, so I might play around with jets and stuff, but we'll see. And it idles good. It is very rideable in the mid-range and at the higher RPMs, obviously. I did buy the higher revving cams. In retrospect, would I have done that again? Probably, but, and I don't know this for sure, I really feel like a little bit of head work would have helped these cams, because it's a little flat, like 6,500 to 7,000. I always I naturally get the feeling of wanting to just short shift it, and I feel like I would get more, better acceleration. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's just kind of the impression I get. And these are the best flowing Sportster heads, apparently, the 04 to 06 Roadsters, or Sportsters in general. So keep that in mind. You might not want quite as much cam. You might want the 560s over the 70s, or 70s over the 60s, whichever one's rev lower. I can't remember which. I think I have the 60s. So the 560s are a little lower lift, but they're higher revving cam, I guess. Anyway, so that'd be my only thing. Really talk to him about the cam selection. I probably didn't talk to him as much as I should have. I don't regret these cams at all. You may want them as well, but just do your homework on that, because it's going to make the bike feel different. This feels a lot different than stock, and I think those other cams would have felt more like stock, but just with more power. And I think that definitely has some benefit to it. So, food for thought anyway. One cool thing about Harleys is their low end torque, and you do lose a little bit of that in trade-off for some higher end horsepower. So keep that in mind. But one thing to consider, you might want to carry around octane booster. Also, you might want to carry around a little bit of octane booster just for if you have to put 87 in it because you cannot find gas and you're going to run out. You can dump a load of octane booster in there, at least get you close, and ride around the octane until you can get better gas or something. You don't want to leave yourself stranded because you can't find 893 somewhere. But that's the only disadvantage of this kit. On the stock motor, you can definitely squeak by with 87. I did it a couple times when I had to. Didn't really seem to have any issues. On this motor, I don't think you'd get away with that. I think you would kill the motor. So be really, really careful, guys. And if you absolutely had to do that, and I'm sure Hammer does not recommend this, and I wouldn't either, but if you had to do it, you might want to crank your timing down to nothing, just to try to get yourself the best chance of not pre-igniting. But even if your timing low, you'll still pre-ignite without enough octane. So it's only going to do so much, but it's something anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But other than that little octane quirks, the daily rideability is essentially unchanged. I mean, I've probably lost just a tiny bit of real low end torque. I'd have to look at the dyno graph. It's a little bit luggier, below 3,000, below 2,500, but it's still very, you can still shift like this, just cruising around. The bike's not going, shaking your brains out. But I wouldn't just crank the throttle at 2,500 and expect it to go anywhere. But the Sportster's always been a little higher revving anyway, so that was kind of always true, even stock. It's just a little more luggy down low, maybe. And again, I have to look at the dyno graph because I'm not even sure if that's 100% true. The 1275 plus the compression probably makes up for most of that higher revving cam down low. So here's the cool thing, guys. And this also, though, I'm going to put a disclaimer in again. Fuel economy. So I've been getting almost identical mileage of stock, I'll get about 120 miles till I go on reserve, which is about 2.7 gallons. So I get about 40 to 50 depending on how much you beat on the bike. I've always gotten 40 to 50. If you're really hyper mile it, I've actually gotten 55, and I think I got 60 one time, but it was probably like a downhill stretch. So you can do pretty good on these bikes. Honestly, the mileage seems completely unchanged, but that scares me a little bit because the mileage should be a little worse, I would think, being the bigger bore and everything and the higher revving cam. So I'm wondering if I'm running a little bit lean. And does it radically change the feeling of the bike? Yes and no. So when you're putting around like this, it feels essentially identical. Sounds a little bit healthier, and it's definitely a little louder. Even with a more baffled exhaust than I used to have, the bike is absolutely louder. So make sure you choose your exhaust wisely, because to get the horsepower out of this thing, especially at the high RPMs, you're going to need a pretty loud exhaust. And for all I know, this exhaust isn't even free-flowing enough. I mean, I think it is, but just I know how loud it is and how relatively big baffle it has. So keep that in mind. Also, that might be an argument to get the lower revving cams. If you don't want quite as loud of an exhaust, you don't have to move as much air, so you can probably get away with a bigger baffle and still make good lower end power. Back to the exhaust. Yeah, so they discontinued a lot of exhausts for Sportsters for whatever reason. For example, the biggest power exhaust on Hammer's site that they ever tested was the Patriot Defender. Honestly, it was ugly as sin in my opinion, but it made good power. But discontinued. Don't know why. Thrashing discontinued their Sportster line. Must not have sold enough. There is a company called, what's the name of it? I forget, guys. Speed something maybe? But they make Sportster exhausts that are more modern styling, right? Upswept like this. There's a stainless. But I didn't know it existed until after I bought this, so I might have bought that one. Don't know if highway pegs fit. The passenger peg fits with that one. Things to think about. But anyway, there just aren't a lot of options if you want a upswept, modern, high clearance exhaust, because that's the thing, right? This Cobra has really good clearance. You hit the foot peg long before you hit that exhaust, which I love, because you want to, when you're cornering, right? It's so hard to judge where you are when your exhaust is the first thing that hits. And you're going through a corner, you just smack that exhaust, and it's just like, it's probably not really good for the motor, because all that energy goes right into the motor. But then beyond that, you're upsetting the whole chassis, because now you're moving the motor inside the frame, which moves the swing arm. So you're giving yourself mid-corner wobbles beyond what the physical impact just makes. There's like post wobbles. And it's just kind of dangerous, because you could low side the bike just from smacking the exhaust so hard. So now I can just grind the peg, and I know, okay, I'm hitting the peg, better not lean over too much further, because I'm going to hit parts that matter, like the exhaust or the frame or whatever it is. And I actually lean this bike over just statically in the garage. And I kind of think, believe it or not, I don't even think the exhaust would hit first. I almost think the frame would hit first, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but it's pretty up and out of the way. So it's definitely a much better design than the stock exhaust for clearance. And I didn't even have a stock exhaust. I had a aftermarket slip-ons that gave me a little bit more room. The regular stock size slip-ons, I mean, they just hit. They like, you had noticeably less lean angle to the right. Now I've probably got more lean angle to the right, because the kickstand is the first thing that drags on the left-hand side. So it's just nice. You give yourself free cornering performance right there. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. God bless America. I'll see you on the next one.